Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Justine Reichman, your co-host, here with Sarah Parlow and Andrew Dent. We're excited to have you here today. This is an exciting conversation. We want to introduce you to Andrew Dent, who is from Material ConneXion, and we're going to learn a little bit about how he got involved in Material ConneXion, what he does there, and the impact he's having on this beautiful library that he has behind us that apparently nobody is having access to right now or utilizing the way that they should. But first I want to tell you a little bit about myself and introduce you to Sarah Parlow, so you get to know us better as we continue to have these talks and talk about the intersection of food and fashion and the impact that food and fashion are having on the sustainability and the environment and how we bring them into the future. So NextGenChef, along with SPUNJ, powers these talks. And NextGenChef works to change the future of food, and we work to change and empower people to make more informed choices. And through NextGenChef and SPUNJ, we work to really empower people to learn a little bit more about the choices they're making so they can make informed choices. And we bring these talks to you to bring thought leaders and change makers here so that we can get more information about the choices we're making, so that as we build businesses, we make purchases, we can make more informed choices. So my lovely co-host here is here to share with you a little bit about SPUNJ, and together we make these things happen.
Thank you, Justine. My name is Sarah Parlow. I'm the founder of SPUNJ Sustainability, which is an online resource for sustainable fashion, beauty, and lifestyle products. And today we have Dr. Andrew Dent from Material ConneXion with us. Dr. Dent, I'm going to say a little bit about you, Andrew, so everyone knows who you are. Dr. Andrew Dent is the Executive Vice President of Materials Research at Material ConneXion and the Chief Material Scientist at Sandow. He has a PhD in materials science from the University of Cambridge. And prior to joining Material ConneXion, he worked with Rolls-Royce, the US Navy, NASA, and the Department of Defense. Very impressive. We are very happy to have you here today, Andrew Dent.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone else for joining us too. So Andrew, I was going to start off by asking you, please explain to everyone exactly what Material ConneXion is and how you became involved.
Sure. So it's been around for about 20 years, and we are a global resource for innovative and sustainable materials. We do that through, we have a materials library you can see behind me. This is part of our location on Park Avenue in New York City. We also have libraries around the world. We have locations in Japan, in Thailand. We have one over, I'm just about to start on the West Coast. So we have these libraries around the world, and they help our clients find and then use innovative and sustainable materials. And those materials come from anywhere. We get a lot of materials from aerospace, from agriculture, from medical. We love the idea of cross-pollination, getting materials perhaps from one industry, let's say military, and then using it perhaps in sports equipment or fashion. So that cross-pollination is what we're all about, finding different types of materials that then can be used in what we call the consumer-facing design industries. What that means is anybody who's making things for us as consumers. So if you think about your just environment right now, so the computer I'm looking at, this water bottle that I have in my hand, the mask that I've been wearing earlier, the table that the computer sits on, all of those are use materials, and they tend to be for us consumers, and they're thinking about the materials in terms of performance, but also sustainability and aesthetics. You know, how to, you know, when you think maybe you're choosing a material, there's a whole bunch of parameters you're selecting. So we help them find those materials through samples in our library. And then also we have a team of researchers who go out into the world and find all these different materials, get samples of them, house them in our library, and also, if it's part of the project we're working on, send them to our clients. And our clients include everybody from Apple, Google, Tesla. They include a lot of the fashion houses. We work with a lot of the car companies. And, you know, a lot of the major brands that we talk about every day when we're thinking about whether it's fashion, accessories, products, and spaces and environments.
Wow. So tell me, before we go even further and more in depth into the library and what you're doing and the impact you're having, how did you get involved?
I was persistent. I was doing some teaching and research out on Long Island, doing some work for DARPA, which is a defense agency, the Navy's defense agency. Doing some t-shirts, doing some teaching, doing some research, and I saw a flyer about Material ConneXion on someone's coffee table. I looked at it and I thought, you know what? That's what I want to do. So I found the phone number of the place, and I called up the guy who started it, a guy called George Valerian. And I said, I want to work for you. I think I'd be good for you. And he said, we're not interested right now. We're doing other things. So, okay, fair enough. So then about a week later, I called him up again. You really need to see me. I really believe that what I have, which is this background in material science, will be useful for your clients. So eventually, after like 3 phone calls, he decides to see me. I convince him. And then basically, I've been sort of with the company ever since. And I think it's that combination of deep material science that a lot of our researchers have, but then the understanding about design. Because if you talk to an engineer, they're all about numbers and data, which doesn't really translate well into, well, how does the fabric look? How does it feel? How does it make me feel? How does it drape? Those sorts of things. So the idea of our value is really taking the science and the new technologies, making it understandable to anybody who isn't necessarily a scientist, and then translating the data points from that material into the real world experience that designers and wearers will have about material.
What do you think it was that you said that got you the job?
Well, actually,
if I could be so bold as to ask.
Well, we were sitting in a cafe. It was in a steel case building up in Columbus Circle. And he looked up and there was a lampshade that was designed by, I think it was Philip Johnson, who was a famous architect. He said, okay, well, how was that made? And I think my response was, okay, I came up with sort of what I thought how it was actually made. And I think it was compelling enough that he said, you know what, okay, maybe we'll have a place for you.
Oh, so you think that was his rationale too? You think that's why he gave you the job?
I think so, but I think in our conversations, I think a lot of the stuff that I was interested in is the same sort of thing that his clients were. So that's why, I think that's why it worked. I think there was a synergy between, between because in my work, working with scientists is great, but I find that I get a lot more energy from creative people. So when I'm around creative people, and a lot of my time is spent working with creatives, designers, and that to me is what really propels and energizes the work that I do. It's listening and learning from them what their needs are and be able to interact with them. So their energy fuels mine, and that's why I really do love what I do, and I've been doing it for 20 years.
Wow. Yeah, no, and I can hear the passion in your voice. And before I monopolize this conversation, Sarah, jump in because I feel like I was just going to go. I had like 3 more questions I was going to shoot at him. So Sarah, take it away.
Our platforms are both about sustainability, and we know that sustainability is one of the metrics that you use to evaluate the materials that you come across. So how do you guys measure sustainability? How prevalent is it in your clients' demands when asking for materials?
Okay, so I teach, and one of the statements I make to the people I teach is there is no such thing as a sustainable material. What that means is, and I use the example of the Boeing Dreamliner. Okay, the Boeing Dreamliner is this wonderful aircraft. The majority of it's made out of carbon fiber composites. So carbon fiber, as we know, is this woven structure. You've probably seen it in high performance automotive. So that material by itself is horrible. The process to make it from pitch is not particularly sustainable. You bond it with some glue and then you put it together. It's very labor intensive. The materials aren't particularly nice. There's no way to recycle it. So overall, carbon fiber composite is not a sustainable material. If you ask anybody, don't use it. But because it allows the plane to become so much lighter, the amount of fuel that's saved when a Boeing Dreamliner goes from, say, LA to New York, the amount of fuel that's saved means that overall, it's a wonderfully sustainable material because it's saving all that fuel. So that's the rationale I have behind there's no such thing as a sustainable material. It's how you use it. So you can have a recycled material, you can have a bio-based material, you can have hemp or whatever the material that you're interested in. But unless you use it in the right way, it loses a lot of that value. So sustainable materials don't exist. Sustainable use of materials exists. So you can't just assume that if you're using recycled content, it's better. You have to be careful about that. So the way we assess, though, in sustainability is, rather than saying, is it sustainable or not, is what are the metrics we can measure? So does it have recycled content and how much? Is it post-industrial, as in stuff that you get from a factory, or is it post-consumer, the stuff that you pick up from the curb? How much water does it use? What's the overall carbon footprint? Like how much carbon dioxide is it letting up into the air during its manufacture and use? Does it come from waste materials? So rather than having sustainability as this big sort of vague thing, what we have is data points. So in any material, let's say it is my mask, then if I'm using a certain amount of recycled content, if I have manufactured to make sure that there's very little water use in the dyeing, maybe maybe I'm using some waste materials. Those are the metrics we can work with, and those are the things that we assess. So any material that comes into our library, any material that we recommend to a client, we think about the material in terms of those distinct points that we can then measure.
I love that.
A lot goes into that. I love that, right?
Yeah.
That's very thoughtful. I mean, there's a huge amount that goes into that. And I think that that's a great resource. Amazing.
Yeah.
All
Also,
those products you're talking about, Sarah, on your, on your market, in your marketplace. I mean, I wonder, if they're using this library.
I mean, I'm hoping that a lot of people do. I'm certainly going to be recommending that they use it in the future for sure. But I love the fact that, I never really thought about it in terms of, I'm always so focused on analyzing the material and how sustainable it is, and never really thought about the impact of how it's being used, and if that is, reducing carbon or, saving energy. And I wonder if there is a future in fashion for that as well, like in terms of, is it going to cause, are there going to be materials that are going to reduce carbon emissions, or, reflect the sunlight, or, create energy?
Yeah,
It's funny. Oh, sorry, Andrew. No, go on.
no, finish your thought.
I was just going to say, I spoke with somebody on my podcast the other day that just wrote a book called Eat Less Water. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's all about things that you can eat, and eating things that take less water to make. So, and how to find items, wine, all sorts of things that have thought about the way that they make them or produce them that take less water to make. So from recipes to all sorts of things. And I thought it was super interesting. And so as you're saying this is what's going through my mind. How do we consume less water by the things that we do on a daily basis, whether it's the clothing that we're wearing and how is it consumed to the food that we're making and putting on the plate. So whether it's the marketplace that that Sarah's putting together, whether it's the chefs that we're working with or the CPG products that we're putting together, to the products that they're putting their food in to sell. It's all wrapped up in a little bow there.
It is challenging because, yes, using less water is it's good, but then when you have so many different metrics that you need to concern yourself with, that maybe in using less water we're using more of something else. And
right.
Also, let's also understand that water, it's recyclable. It's a wonderful. When I drink it, it gets recycled. The challenge is not the use of water; it's ensuring that when we do use it, when we've basically gone through the system, we're not contaminating it, we're not polluting it. One of the challenges we have with fashion, of course, is that there is an awful lot of dyeing, and dyeing is probably one of the most polluting industries that we have. Apart from, I think it's like fashion is second or third in terms of the overall water polluter, because we have an awful lot of dyeing and use an awful lot of water. There are new technologies that don't use any water at all. There are waterless dyeing. It acts very much like dry cleaning. So you have had companies who've used waterless dyeing, so that it does exist, but it tends to be a relatively niche area. So you do have an awful lot of dyeing. Dyeing in of itself is okay as long as you make sure the water is cleaned afterwards. So high quality dyeing, you end up, you use the dye, you then clean the water, put the water back out again. That water's good enough to use again. So the challenge is often not how much water we use, but what we do with it in the process. If we can clean it properly, so when it goes out again, it's clean enough to drink, then that to me is no problem. You can use as much water as you want.
I'm certainly glad I caught up with you, because when you initially said dyeing, I'm imagining dying. And then it was not until the third or fourth dyeing that I finally got on to that you were talking about clothes dyeing.
Yes, I am.
So my initial thought is like, dyeing takes the most waste. I was like, wow. But as we're having this conversation and you were talking about all these different things, one of the questions that came up for me is, I'm curious what some of the trends are that you're seeing around, the biggest trends that you're seeing around material innovations for food and fashion. Are there any that you can maybe talk to?
Yes, of course, yes.
I wouldn't have asked the question if I didn't think you knew at least a few.
um, so for a lot of the fashion industry, it is, okay, how do we maintain as little impact as possible? You know, with the advent of fast fashion a number of years ago, you know, it doesn't seem like that's going away. Though I think the pandemic has, you know, to its credit, it's made us think differently about the clothes that we wear. You know, I think all of the decisions we make, suddenly we've got a little bit more time to think about them. If, you know, I spend a lot of my time at home at the moment, so you know, the clothing choices are very different than if I was coming into the office every day. Also, I'm thinking about just the materials being used, whether I need new clothing. You know, obviously, I want the fashion industry to grow and be as wonderful as it has been. But also, I think we're making more considered choices, whether it's with food, whether it's with fashion. And I think that is partially because we now have a lot more information. You know, the internet has allowed us to delve a little deeper into the food that we're eating, the clothes that we're wearing, understanding a little bit more about what the company is doing in terms of its overall carbon footprint, its environmental footprint. So I think there's a lot more consideration. And because of that, I think a lot of companies now are thinking a little bit more about the sources for the materials they use, whether it is for fashion or food. And we've seen big trends in a more diverse range of renewable materials. So what I mean by that is we've had cotton. I'm wearing a cotton shirt right now. We've had that for a long time. We also know that cotton tends to be quite water and energy intensive. It's an industrialized crop, so we have a lot of it. But we're starting to see more interest around things such as agricultural waste being used to produce viscose, rayon, and materials and tensile materials like that. We've seen an uptick in the use of things such as hemp. So we're seeing different types of renewable fibers. There's one that's coming from a wood source, Naya from Eastman. All of these are alternatives to cotton. Now, are they going to suddenly topple cotton? I don't think so, because cotton has that very large footprint and is used so ubiquitously. But at least we're now seeing alternatives. So we're seeing different types of natural fibers, because we really do want to try and stay away from synthetics if we can. So natural fibers come from a more diverse range of renewable materials. So that to me is interesting. And also in the same area, bioplastics, whether those bioplastics are used to make the packaging or the serving areas for food, whether they are used for fabrics and other accessories. We've seen a large increase in materials that come from things such as seaweed, algae, fungi. We've seen ones, so we've seen materials that are plastic in nature. So again, I'm going to reference my water bottle. So this is a polyester. We know that we can make this polyester from plant-based sources. We know that we can make similar types of plastics that come from things like sugarcane, from corn, from castor beans, so food waste and organic waste that wouldn't be doing anything other than just being composted, those can now be used to process into plastics and used for packaging for food. So the renewable aspect for me is the most interesting, because although oil is cheap at the moment, it's not necessarily a good thing, because although it's cheap enough to run our cars, that stuff is not renewable. It's coming from the ground, we use it, and then we put it into a landfill. If we recycle it, that's great, but our recycling rates are not that high at the moment. So renewable materials are much better if we can get it from stuff that grew, because when it grows, it sucks in carbon dioxide. It's sucking that carbon dioxide in from the air. That's a good thing. So the more stuff we produce from things that are grown, the better it is.
So just for our listeners that are, on Facebook and just seeing this video, they want to understand what is the impact for them and on the world if they're making these choices knowingly. What's the impact? Like, why do they want to do this?
Well,
in layman's term, in a simple sort of way, not sort of in grandeur, just they want to do this because it will
allow next generations to have a more reasonable life living on this planet. It's as simple as that. Okay. Every choice we make has impact. It may not seem like that much, but what we've also found is that the wonders of capitalism is that if I read about a company and maybe I don't want to purchase that, enough people do that, then the company has to either it goes under or it needs to change its decisions. And a lot of the major brands have done this. They are understanding that we as consumers have an awful lot of power, and we do think about those sort of things. So there's been sustainability initiatives and drives from all of the major brands, understanding that we as consumers have that power.
Right. It really is. It's about making a choice, and I think that we have an opportunity here, Sarah and I, with this table talk, to be able to share this information so that people have the power to make a choice. So I'm sorry, Sarah, if I cut you off.
Okay, my question was the bioplastics. Are they biodegradable? Are they recyclable? How are they? I mean, I know obviously it's better to not use petroleum, but how are they better practically, in their life cycle from regular plastic?
Sure. Yeah, this is one of those areas of sustainability where it depends, and I use that phrase a lot because, okay, so bioplastics, as I mentioned, they suck in carbon dioxide when they're growing. You then use them. At the end of their life, some are easily biodegradable. There are ones that are intended to biodegrade quite quickly. Those tend to be used for things such as packaging, where the intention is to protect the food or the product while it's being shipped and then to my door. And then once I get rid of it, if it does end up in the environment, it doesn't last very long. So biodegradability is good, but it's not the only thing. So bioplastics, some are biodegradable, others are recyclable. So water bottle again, if I make it from plant-based sources, this can go back into the recycling stream. It can go again and again and again. When we talk about biodegradability, it's not as though there are some bioplastics that break down really quite quickly. There are even water-soluble ones. You've probably seen some packaging, the Tide Pods. Those things contain plastics that are water-soluble. So those exist. But most biodegradable materials, again, I'm going to use my shirt as an example. This is cotton, okay? Cotton is biodegradable. But do I expect it to last the next 10 years through repeated washing and wearing? Yes. So biodegradability can happen quite quickly out there in the environment, but I'm not expecting it to happen while I'm using it. So biodegradability is good. The one challenge we have with biodegradability, though, is in the same way that carbon dioxide was sucked in during the growing phase, if my shirt or my water bottle goes out there into the environment and biodegrades in the environment, it gives off carbon dioxide because that's the whole ecosystem of plants. So that's okay because it's a net zero amount. That's why we don't want to use petroleum, because at least then the bioplastic has sucked in some carbon dioxide to start with. So bioplastics, some are biodegradable, quickly or not. Some are recyclable, and that's what we want to do. And the best are both. So the best ones, and what we're trying to recommend our clients use, are recyclable under normal conditions. So I can put the water bottle back into the system. I can put potentially my synthetic fabric back into the system and recycle it and use it again. But put it in the specific environment, such as in a landfill, out there in the sea, out there in the environment, and it will break down quite quickly, because what it has there is sunlight, moisture, microbes, and the microbes do their work by basically eating away that material. So the best are both recyclable or biodegradable, depending on which on where the product ends up.
I was going to say, I don't know if you know about this, but I've been listening. Actually, I think I listened to it on your platform. A man who is developing enzymes to eat plastics. Didn't I see that on your platform?
Yes, yes. Those are great. What I'm hoping is they don't take over the world and eat everything organic. Let's be honest. You see the movies where suddenly some scientific experiment had great potential and then went horribly wrong. I'm not suggesting these enzymes will suddenly start eating everything else that's organic, but but I think that is the great potential with innovation, and that's why the waterless clothes dyeing, those types of innovation, the ability now to have plastics which can do what we want, which is to recycle or biodegrade. Innovation for me is going to solve a lot of these challenges, because up until 10, 15 years ago, all of our development tended towards how do I make it cheaper, look prettier, easier to make. So those are the main considerations. So most of the engineering, most of the scientists and engineers don't necessarily want to do bad things, but if you're basically asking them to make a cheaper plastic, they're going to find ways of making it more efficient. They're not necessarily concerned about its end of life. Now we're asking the engineers, okay, well, you've made us this great plastic or this great fabric. How do you now make it so that it breaks down more easily? How do we make it so it uses no water? Asking them to do those things, and suddenly they're coming up with these innovations. So we're continually seeing great innovations which can solve some of these challenges. One problem we have, of course, is that can they do it quickly enough? And can it be implemented globally? Because what we can find as innovations here in the US or in Europe or in some parts of Asia don't hit everywhere. I'm going to give a talk about the Philippines. Philippines is thousands of islands, and they don't have any sort of infrastructure for dealing with waste. And the majority of their products come in small packages because they have their ability to purchase volume, like from Costco, is not really possible. So they end up buy small packages, and those end up as waste. So they have a huge waste problem, but with no real solution yet. So these innovations are great. Our challenge is always making sure that we can get them used by those who are most in need of it, not just the developed countries that have good recycling and waste management systems, but other countries as well who also have those same challenges with waste.
To all the food and fashion entrepreneurs out there who are listening, do you recommend, are there any products that are trending right now that are new that they should be looking out for in terms of, you know, packaging, recyclability, all the metrics that we've been talking about?
I mean, my request, my hope is always, whenever you make a decision, or are you about to make a decision about what material to use, because inevitably, if you produce something, there's going to be materials involved. I would love for you to research it a little bit, find out about it, learn a little bit more, because that can also be part of the story. You know, if you're going to deliver a wonderful piece of food to someone, if you're packaging it, if the packaging can be part of that story, that I think has some great value. And if that's the case, you need to know what that material is. PHAs, which sounds a very technical thing, so PHA, they're a new type of plastic that come from waste that are just being developed that are being touted as a great new potential material for packaging. Recycle content when you can. It's possible to get a large amount of recycled content into a lot of different plastics without compromising on performance, transparency, printability, all those different things that you want a package to do. So I would look for where you can get recycled content. I'd look for where you can get PHAs or some of these new bioplastics. I would also be very clear to your customer what they can do to help. So make it clear on the packaging. What do you expect them to do with that packaging afterwards? Okay, you've taken the time to make this thing biodegradable or easily recyclable. Let them know, because a consumer who suddenly got this great product from you or this great experience is eager to try it. They've got the packaging. Tell them what to do with it. Make sure that they understand that they can be part of the solution. If you spent the time to develop and manufacture this packaging or work with this packaging or this clothing that has this great new material, let them know that they're part of the journey. Let them also know that they can be part of the solution as well. So for me, a lot of it's to do with just knowledge. Educate yourself, educate your consumer.
A friend of Justine and ours, who has a laundry pod business, has created this amazing, you know, packaging. It's completely biodegradable, recyclable. The problem is on the end where, you know, where does the customer take it to, right? So sometimes it's like, I mean, I find there always sometimes a disconnect with coordinating with municipalities or townships or cities in terms of having the technology on their end to make those, you know, to make it useful, to make it actually recyclable. Do you find that, or are...
Yes. This is a challenge. You know, in the way that we've got great curbside recycling for water bottles, we don't have the same sort of system for our clothing. We have, you know, here in New York City, we have a wonderful facility on the Brooklyn Navy Yards, just down by the water, and they are great at sorting and recycling and reusing clothing. So we have resources, and other municipalities have them too. It's just finding out where they are and also taking the time to go deliver your product to them. I mean, reuse is a great one. You know, thrifting in general, sort of the ability to have your clothing used by someone else and enjoyed by someone else. That to me is the first step. We can reuse it without needing to pull it apart, because in any recycling system, there's going to be waste. If I can get this shirt cleaned sufficiently and someone else uses it, that's great. That's the first thing we want to do. If we are to recycle it, yes. That is one of my challenges. But online, you can probably find a clothing bank. You can find places where these types of things can be recycled. And the recycling ability has improved. We've now got what's called garment-to-garment recycling. So in theory, I could take my cotton shirt, give it to this garment-to-garment recycler. One company it's a technology called Osomtex, OSOMTEX. They have a process where they can take this shirt, put it into their recycling system. It pulls it apart, But the idea is that the fibers, the staple fibers, the cotton fibers that are part of this shirt, if you recycle them too roughly, they tend to get cut. And the shorter the fibers get, the less quality, high quality the product is. So they can pull the shirt apart, they can undye it, so they can remove some of those dyes. They can then take those fibers and then spin them back into yarn, and then they can be manufactured back into a t-shirt. So the idea is my shirt goes through this system and ends up as someone else's socks, or someone else's shirt, or even a blanket. So that to us is a great innovation where we can now take it through that entire system. In the same way that you have bottle-to-bottle recycling for our packaging, we can have garment-to-garment recycling. So we're able to, there are companies that do that and are selling products out there. I know that Stella McCartney had produced a line of socks that use this process of garment-to-garment recycling, where we're putting one garment in, getting another garment out again.
Awesome. It was Ocean Tex, you said? That was the name of it?
Osomtex, O-S-O-M-T-E-X.
Excuse me. So I'm curious just to ask you, how do you see food borrowing from fashion or vice versa to build a more sustainable future?
Yeah, I mean, food is is a different experience than fashion, but I guess the whole idea is that it's supposed to bring us joy, and I guess it's nutritious in different ways. So I think for me, it's about telling the story and telling the journey. So in a way that we used to, the experience and our knowledge of food would simply be the point at which we purchase it to the point at which we get rid of it. A relatively narrow amount of information. I think what we're finding from both of those now is that knowledge about the other parts, the part before, the part afterwards. For food, it's very much been about where does my food come from? I want to know a little bit more about the processing. And not a day goes by when we don't hear about some awful conditions in a pig slaughterhouse, in the challenge we have with some pesticides. It's out there. So the more considered approach, I think, that food has had is now making its way into fashion. We're starting to be more concerned about it. And there are brands that are up and coming, smaller brands, because it's tough. Like companies like H&M, it's tough for them to, they're like a huge ship. They want to turn to become more sustainable, but it takes a while. And that thing is moving in one direction. They want to make sure they maintain their profitability. So what they need to do is they need to take small chunks, small bits. They have to send out a small boat, and that small boat can turn a lot more easily, and then can guide the larger boat. So I think we're seeing a lot more interest in the whole journey of fashion in the way that the same thing was for food. I think that's not a bad thing. So just a better understanding of the impact that we as consumers make. This is no longer just our responsibility. The choice we make here at the store, it says basically we also somewhat take responsibility for what happened previous. When you purchase a piece of clothing, some food, where the people making it did it not only with love and passion, but also did it with consideration for the environment. That to me is a definite evolution, and one that couldn't come too soon.
You mentioned it briefly earlier, the concept of thrift, and I saw the TED Talk that you did about thrift. Can you tell everyone a little bit about that and what it means? Yes,
it's one of the challenges you have with sustainability is that so often the processes and the methodologies and the mindset that we had 30, 50 years ago is now coming back to basically say, well, this is probably the right thing to go, the right thing to do. So thrift to me was always about waste. Why, the wastefulness of our current convenience society. Convenience will be the death of us. The ability to get anything anywhere at any time because it's convenient is what has fueled a lot of the problems we have with the waste that we have in the oceans. It's convenience. So thrift is more just sort of being more considerate. I'm not going to suddenly suggest that we all start mending everything, because there isn't the infrastructure for that. I mean, I do that myself, and I have pairs of shoes that are 20 to 30 years old that I've mended again and again. But I'm not suggesting that we suddenly go back to that sort of system. But reuse is where it can be of value. So we now have the ability using software to track where everything is. They're talking about it in architecture, where when I'm pulling down building A because I no longer need it, there's got to be a whole bunch of materials in there that would normally go to the landfill that potentially we could put in building B. So that to me is sort of, that's big data helping architecture be thrifty. It's the same thing with clothing, the reuse. And obviously thrift stores are a great example of this. How do we take that idea where we can reuse stuff and apply it to many other industries? Because the concept of waste to me has always been fascinating. Okay, I had my hair cut just before this this talk. Okay, so the hair on my head, while it's on my head, is wonderful. I love it. I have run my hand through it. I enjoy it. It's a crowning glory to your face. So we love our hair. Okay, while it's still on our head. As soon as that hair is cut off my head and it lands on the floor, it's disgusting. I don't want to touch it. No one wants to get near it. So that, but it hasn't changed fundamentally as a material. So that's the same thing we're trying to consider with waste. Just because I put something in the trash, it shouldn't lose its inherent value of being of material that can be reused again. So trying to reuse either through direct reuse, someone else wearing my shirt, or through indirect use where I can give this to someone else and they can reprocess it, or even a material that was considered waste now has an inherent value. Because this water bottle is an engineering marvel. And yet I treat it with zero value at all because I don't feel as though, I didn't pay for this, I paid for the water that's inside. But this thing is being engineered so efficiently, it uses such great material, and it can hold water probably for the next 100 years if I wanted it to. So an engineering marvel, yet we perceive no value in it. So the thrift to me is being more careful with what we do, being more efficient, which of course is always a good thing, but also understanding that just because I no longer want to use something doesn't mean it no longer has any value. And that for me is the part. And finding out where we can take those used materials and put them back into the system to reuse either as they are or recycled or biodegraded, or just so that they don't lose their inherent value. A lot of love and care and effort was put into producing the clothing that I wear, the products that I use. Why should I suddenly consider it as useless as soon as I no longer have a use for it? There's going to be a second use. And thrift for me is not necessarily doing that wholesale, but just considering that. If I'm making a product, can I consider what it might be used afterwards? There was a great example, Steelcase put together a system where they intentionally put in fire retarders to the plastics they were using in their chairs, with the assumption that when people finished using their chairs, those plastics could then be used in a particular application that needed fire retarders. So you didn't have to chop the material up and pull it apart anymore. You can simply just reuse that plastic immediately. So that consideration, what can the second life be?
Wow, well, at least I'm sitting here thinking about all of the food entrepreneurs and all of the fashion entrepreneurs that we work with. And for me, it's really inspiring to think about all the things that they put together, whether it's the packaging, whether it's the clothing, whatever it is, and thinking about when they put together a new season, when they put together new products, when they have product that's expired, to think about that as they're going through the supply chain and they're going through the process. What can they create so that it has a second use? Mm-hmm. So that's what's going through my mind as you're talking about this. So I hope that it inspires some of the entrepreneurs that are listening to this talk right now, so that when they're going through the process, maybe that's part of the conversation that they can have.
I think also the idea is that you want to be proud of what you've done. You want to, want to put some out there into the world, and you not only want people to love it, but also for it to have some positive effect. So I think that is and I think, we have seen that in the last 10 to 15 years. A lot of people are now considering those something and are using that as part of the way they sell product, because consumers now, millennials, we talk a lot about them, but they know a lot more about the stuff that they're wearing and they're using and they're eating. They are, they are more considered consumers. They're more demanding, and that is great because it forces us as producers to think about the consequences of that. So I think it's been driven by the younger people, and that's why I love to do what I do, because I talk to these people and we can, I can educate and help them, and they are sort of empowered to make those better decisions. And then also tell the story as well, because everyone loves a feel-good story. Everyone loves a story in which they can, if I can talk to someone about the food I've just eaten, not just about how good it was and how the experience was, but then also the backstory and the story going forward as well. That to me is a much richer experience for the products that we're purchasing and eating.
So Andrew, for our listeners that are here today, whether it's through Facebook or otherwise, or those that pick it up down the road, is there a way for them to connect with the library and the resources you have if they're not in one of these cities, or because of COVID, if they're not going out? Because you have so much to offer and there is so much information there. Is there a way to access the information?
Yes, of course. We are online. We have an online database. So the 10,000 material samples that you see, some of which are behind me, we have an individual entry for each of those materials, and we have them searchable. So we have a searchable database, and you can search by sustainability. You can search by, you can put in, I'm looking for a recycled content textile, or I'm looking for a dyeing process. So there are an online search capability that our members have, which enable them to source these materials. And we're not a marketplace, so we don't buy or sell these materials. We simply provide you contact information about where to get them. So we're a connector. The reason why we use the X in connection.
So you mentioned membership. What is a membership?
Membership allows you access physically to our location here, as well as our locations around the world. So you can access physically and talk to one of our material specialists and orient yourself around the library, use that. You can also have online access as well. So you can search, if you're at home, you're in lockdown, you can use our online database. And you can just go to materialconnexion.com, and there are various different ways in which you can get those memberships. They're for a year, it's unlimited access, and it allows you to also interact with one of our material researchers to sort of help you through that library selection process. So we can guide you through, because with 10,000 materials, how to decide which one to choose. So we can certainly guide you on how best to search on the online database.
Wonderful. Okay, and is there a special link that maybe you can share with us that we could put in the show notes or include for our members? And maybe you can verbally say it here for those that are listening so that they can access it directly.
Yes, it's www.materialconnexion, and connection, as I mentioned, has an X, so it's MATERIAL. Connexion is CONNEXION.com. And we have our website there. You can kind of check it out. We've got videos explaining what we do. Some of our sort of most recent materials that we found. We've got a bunch of news and stuff there. So, and also you can get information about memberships.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Sarah, any other questions we want to ask Andrew while we're here before we wrap up?
No, I think that's amazing. I mean, just to everyone who's listening, I have been on the Material ConneXion website, and there is a plethora of information on there, amazing videos, and they even recommend individual materials, incredible things like from a whole variety, not just food and fashion, but I mean, you guys deal with electronics, travel, media, entertainment, packaging, retail, architecture, everything, right? Is there anything else I'm missing that we haven't mentioned?
I was pretty good. I should hire you for that. That was a great advert for what we do. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank our listeners for joining us. I want to thank you, Andrew, for joining us. I think it was a great conversation. We really did get to talk about the connection between food and fashion and the impact that the materials have on it. And it really did inspire the conversation around being thoughtful and choosing and thinking about what we're doing as we create the future of food and fashion. So thank you so much for inspiring that conversation and being part of it. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.